I think the Arsenal players will be hurting.
Those first 20-25 minutes, PSG was so good. Some of the best football I've seen this season, all competition, all league, all team combined.
There's been a lot made of the Emirates Stadium atmosphere last night, and there's been a lot of talk about the tifo that was unveiled.
I think it's just credit to PSG, really, because I think what they did is they took the atmosphere.
The PSG, this is their 4th and 6th season. This is more than Arsenal in their whole history. Last night, the first 15 minutes was one of the worst times I've seen Timber having since he joined the club. This team with Dembele and without Dembele is not the same.
So I thought he was really good, but he played like he played for West Ham.
He said that Arsenal are used to falling away.
Calm yourself down, Wayne.
Exactly.
When I said 60-40 still for PSG now, I think that's a fair reflection.
Give him a DVD of May 26, 1989. Our manager, Graham, said, get in at half-time 0-0. We can do the same as what they did to us. This is theirs to lose. And you can spin that round as a massive positive for us.
Hello and welcome to Inside Gooners, talkSPORT's show all about the mighty Arsenal. And what a couple of shows we've got lined up for you as our fight for a Champions League final spot in Munich is well underway against Paris Saint-Germain. Joining me this week is former Arsenal winger Perry Groves and sports reporter for The Standard, Simon Collings. Gents, I'll start with you, Perry. How are you feeling after the first leg against PSG? It was a little bit of a bruising affair from an Arsenal point of view.
Yeah, nous sommes toujours dans le jeu. We are still in the game. All the negativity is just like, calm down, we're 1-0 down basically at half-time. Didn't go, obviously, the way we wanted it. We'll talk about the game later on, like the first 20-25 minutes. But it's not, trust me, it's not all doom and gloom. We have Thomas Partey.
Simon, how are you feeling after the first leg?
Yeah, I think there was a point probably at the start and the end of that match where it felt like Arsenal might not be in the tie. And to be fair, in those closing moments, I was thinking more about the need for Arsenal not to concede than score. You know, I think 1-1 would have been great, but 2-0 was much worse than 1-0. So, and I think the good thing for Arsenal is you can look at that game and we can analyse that game. We can see where you'd improve. You can see the things you'd fix. It's not like they've come away from it and saying you've been outplayed for the 90 minutes. How are you going to win this game? You can look at it and say, this is what we can do to change it. And I think Arteta over these next few days will be working out a plan to try and get Arsenal to that final.
Well, there's only one place to start after the Arsenal women produced a stunning comeback against French side Lyon to make the Women's Champions League final. Mikel Arteta's side hosted PSG last night in their bid to become finalists in Europe's primary competition for the first time since 2006. It took just 4 minutes for Ousmane Dembele to strike and shock Emirates Stadium, with the Gunners unable to find an equaliser. After the match, Mikel Arteta told the media that Arsenal need to do something special in the second leg to secure their spot in the final.
So two very good teams where the margins are so small and they had efficiency in front of the goal, and their keeper as well made a difference to see the result that we've seen tonight. I think the game had phases, the first 15-20 minutes, especially them scoring so early in a great combination play when the margins are so thin, the finishing is unbelievable. And then we had especially one issue that we corrected after 15-20 minutes, and we sustained that for the rest of the game, which I think it turned the game around. And yeah, you want to win the Champions League final, you have to do something special, and we're going to have to do something special in Paris to be there.
Well, joining us now to provide the PSG angle from the first leg is French football expert Julian Laurens. Julian, how you doing, mate? Good to see you.
Hello, boys. Good to see you too, my friend.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, indeed.
Great French, Perry, by the way.
Merci beaucoup.
It's definitely better than mine, I'll give you that. Julian, after the demolition of Real Madrid in the first leg at Emirates Stadium, I think there were a lot of people out there that felt that Arsenal had a great chance of doing something similar. So what's the reaction been to what happened in the first leg from the kind of French angle? Is there an excitement? Was it expected? Did they see it coming?
I'm not sure if they expected coming, but I think there's a lot of positive, obviously, when a team goes away and win 1-0. I think it's 11 of the last 13 that won the first leg away from home in the semi-final and qualified for the final. I think it's 85%. So it's usually a good thing when you go away in the first leg of a semi-final and win it. I think from the PSG point of view and from the French media, or what we've been saying back home, is for a PSG team that maybe for the last 4 weeks or so hadn't been as good as they used to be earlier in the year, in January, between January and March, what we saw against Liverpool, for example, or the second half against City. They were back at that. And certainly the first 25 minutes, they were at their best. I mean, Harry and Perry, I mean, all of us watch Arsenal all the time too. I can't really remember, or it's maybe that, not that I can remember, but it's really rare that an away team comes to the Emirates and just walk over the team like this. Like the first 20 minutes, if you look at the stats for the first 20 minutes and for the rest of the game, it's just day and night, really. And those first 20, 25 minutes, PSG was so good with the ball, without the ball, in their pressing, the counter-pressing, plus the goal that came after a sequence of 27 passes, 1 minute 10, 9 outfield players touching the ball. It was just like, it was incredible football, really. After that, things level up because there's actually not much between the two teams, I think, really. And Arsenal still have a chance, of course, to overturn the tie even in Paris. But I thought those first 25 minutes, some of the best football I've seen this season, all competition, all league, all team combined.
Julian, you mentioned the first 25 minutes where I think we was lucky to get away with 1-0, to be honest, because they were that dominant. In the days of algorithms, logarithms, you got all the analysts on the side. Why didn't Arsenal combat Dembele dropping deep, not playing as a centre forward, going based into the centre circle, which he did twice before he actually scored his goal, and there was no one within 20 yards. So why do you think Arsenal didn't combat that?
It's a great question, and I think the party up, and I think it was Harry who mentioned it in his introduction, which is right. We've all talked about it, but I think there was always going to need a bit of time for Merino and Rice, especially, to adapt to different positions for them compared to where they've played most of the last few weeks. Really, and if you remember the goal that PSG scored away at Liverpool, it's a very similar pattern of play where Nuno Mendes plays the ball centrally to Dembele, who's dropping. Van Dijk and Konate don't go with him, neither of them. They stay where they are for that back four to be in line. The ball goes to Barcola, it's a cross. And this one is to Dembele. Nobody from Saliba or Kivio has gone with him. Rice and Merino are nowhere to be seen because they're just marking and pressing other players. Then Kvaratskhelia. Maybe the most disappointing in a way is how can Dembele find that space then on the edge of the box to get the ball back from Kvaratskhelia, because it's fine maybe to let him drop, but I think at some point Merino or Rice should have kept running with him to prevent him from having all that space to... It's a great finish, but still he should not have that much space around him.
Simon, there's been a lot made of the Emirates Stadium atmosphere last night, and there's been a lot of talk about the tifo that was unveiled pre-kickoff. Do you think that had an impact on the game, the atmosphere? Was you surprised by how flat it went after PSG took the lead?
I mean, I thought the atmosphere was great for the first sort of 10 minutes before the kickoff, and Arteta, he stressed before the Real Madrid game, he wants everyone in there early. The same for this game where the fans were there early, they packed it out. And I think it's just credit to PSG, really, because I think what they did is they took the atmosphere out of that stadium with the way they played. And I think everyone in there knew PSG was a good team, but the way they played in that 20, 25 minutes, suddenly everyone realised, OK, we're in for a proper game here. And then the second half, I thought the fans came out. They were back early. There was no one in the sort of concourse. They were there. Merino scores a goal. VAR rules out for offside. And again, it sucks the momentum out of the stadium. So I think the fans kind of are always dictated by what happens on the pitch. And I think you've got to give credit to PSG for the way they made the atmosphere change from what it was, before the kickoff. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think, we talk a lot about atmospheres and we talk a lot about the fans' responsibility to kind of deliver a certain type of atmosphere. But if what you're seeing on the pitch doesn't give you that feeling, it's very hard to kind of manufacture that excitement. I don't know about you guys, but I was sitting in the stands last night with my head in my hands for the first 25 minutes because PSG were all over us. And it's very difficult in those circumstances to kind of be super positive and roar and be behind the team. Julian, the PSG fans were very loud, as they always are. Away support always tends to be brilliant. And I think RMC Sport described the Emirates Stadium as a cathedral of silence. Can Arsenal expect a very tough atmosphere in the return leg? Yeah,
I mean, the Parc des Princes has been incredible. Those ultras are just very special, I think, to be fair. I agree with Saido on the atmosphere being there. I think that there's those moments where it was the same again at Liverpool. When Dembele scores after 10 minutes, they put the AC on, and then suddenly, even at Liverpool, when they were in the lead going into that second leg, after that, it was flat there too, because it was almost like you get knocked out and you need a bit of time to realize what was happening. And in that time, the 3,000 PSG fans were singing with the drums, with everything. And it's a bit difficult. And as you just said as well, away support is usually the most hardcore of fans that travel away and etc. etc. So I think the Parc des Princes is going to be really incandescent on Wednesday next week. But that's not saying that you won't be able to hear the Arsenal fans either, the 3,000 of them that will travel. They'll be a bit higher up, but we heard a bit of Aston Villa when they went there. We heard a bit of Liverpool too. So it's true, but the Parc des Princes has had that really, this season especially. Maybe it's because the way the team is playing is such a likable team and a great team to watch if you're a PSG fan, if you're in the stadium, that I think that also gets the crowd going. And for that, I think that the Parc des Princes has been wonderful this season.
Perry, on Martin Odegaard, the Arsenal captain, there's been a lot made of his display yesterday. He's been out of sorts, I think it's fair to say, for a good couple of months now. And it's a shame because obviously we all know what a superb talent he is and we all expected him to get back to his best sooner rather than later. But last night, when you really needed a real inspirational performance from the captain, it just didn't come, did it?
Do you know what? I think with Odegaard, he's not in any rhythm. I can tell you, I've watched him over probably about 10 games, and when he's flowing, he doesn't think. He actually just plays very naturally. I think he's missed Saka on the right-hand side. I think he's missed Kai Havertz up front because obviously he has a link-up play with him. And watching it last night, there was no lack of effort at all. And you could tell in the second half he got on the ball a little bit more. But there's a couple of times when he has a little give and go with Bukayo Saka, he didn't actually play the go. He didn't play the go. He didn't actually play when it come to him. When he plays it first time, he has his little chip pass where he chips it over. So I think he's probably overthinking it a little bit too much. And if it was me, I'd have taken him off after about 65, 70 minutes because we had a little lull in the game for that little period of time and we needed some fresh legs of inspiration. I would have put Nwaneri on a little bit earlier, but form's temporary, class is permanent. Do you know what I mean? And I could just tell, and you could tell he's getting frustrated with himself. You know, when the ball's coming into him, he's not just quite getting himself on the turn and spinning. So from a player like him, you'll expect a massive performance in the second leg next Wednesday, I think it is. It next Wednesday?
Yeah, that's right. Simon, what did you make of Arsenal's midfield generally? Because it felt to me like the balance was a little bit off. We've touched on Partey's absence and Declan Rice was playing a role that he's not really been playing regularly for Arsenal for quite some time. Do you think that the whole dynamic of the midfield was the problem rather than us sort of highlighting any one individual?
Yeah, I just think it didn't quite sort of fit as well as it does when Partey's there. I think everyone knows their roles so well and particularly for Rice, you know, at West Ham, he was that player who sat in front of the back four and he would give the defence some protection. But I think what we've seen at Arsenal is that actually when he's off the leash, when you can let him go, I mean, they call him the horse and you can see why, because the ground he covers, he has such a bigger impact. And I think in the Real Madrid, particularly in that second leg in the Bernabeu, where he had the freedom to just go and press and go cause problems, he didn't want to do that yesterday because he knew if I go, I'm going to leave space. And he was kind of stuck in two minds. I thought he got a bit better when Lewis Skelly tucked in and gave him some protection. And what Lewis Skelly did as well, which what Partey's so good at, is he can take the ball with his back to a player and spin them and go. And I think Rice, again, isn't as good as that. I think Partey gives that. So I think they kind of worked it out after about half an hour where the roles got better. Lewis Skelly gave some more in there. But the midfield, when everyone is there, when it's Partey, when it's Odegaard, when it's Rice, it just functions so well. And I think what you got yesterday was just not as good a version of that. And that's probably why PSG in that 20, 25 minutes were able to get the space they did.
Let's bring Julian Laurens back in because obviously PSG have got more experience at this stage of the competition in recent years. Do you think that played a big part in last night? It felt like maybe Arsenal were a little bit emotional. You know, the occasion was huge and being at home, there is that pressure to go out there and really dictate the game. And instead, PSG turn up and just go, well, no, you know what? We're going to play our game. We're not going to let the atmosphere, the environment get to us. And did their experience come through, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I also put the start that we just mentioned, the first 25 minutes, on a bit of nerves on the Arsenal side, which is, again, I think it's normal. It's part of the learning process. This is still a young team. It's a young manager too that has never been in this position before. Luis Enrique, I said that on the radio yesterday. We were together, Harry. 10 years ago, Luis Enrique wins the treble, including the Champions League. Mikel was still playing football. So there's a point where you can't compare him all the time with Pep and Klopp and Ancelotti and people like that, because this is new for him. It's part of his learning curve. And to not have Partey, to not have Gabriel, to not have Havertz as well, when you're playing your first Champions League semi-final in your career as a manager, for this squad, pretty much all of them, their first ever too, is tricky. And you know, PSG, this is their 4th in 6 season. This is more than Arsenal in their whole history. So of course, at some point, this will be important. PSG last season against Dortmund were so convinced they would qualify and go to the final that they went to Dortmund and got beaten there because they were not ready for the occasion. This is another game. Dortmund are not very good. We just beat Barcelona and we're going to go there and it'll be okay. It'll be easy. And they were a bit unlucky because they hit the woodwork like 6 times in 2 games, but still. And they would have learned a lot from what happened to against Dortmund last season and that kind of disappointment, which Arsenal didn't have the same experience like that. It's a bit like the finals in Champions League. We often say that you don't win the first final. And Arsenal didn't, and Chelsea didn't, and City didn't, and PSG didn't. But it's easier than to play the second final, even if it's not the same players. And I really believe it's same for semi-finals. So let's see what happened in the second leg. But I really believe that yesterday, the fact that PSG had been there before and actually that things didn't go well for them last season at this stage helped them massively on how to just approach this first game, because there was a lot of excitement on the Arsenal side and you could see that and it's great. But you could tell also there was a lot of nerves.
Julian, you mentioned about it's going to be electric atmosphere, obviously, in Parc des Princes, but you can actually spin that on a positive for Arsenal because PSG now have the expectation. I know what it's going to be like, obviously, in the French media. Basically, they'll probably think they've got one foot in the final already. If Arsenal can go there, with Thomas Partey, obviously, as a screen, and even if it gets to 0-0 at half-time, and then the further it goes into the second half, I think you could have a few nerves that start to sort of come in. So Arsenal don't have to go and score straight away, because if PSG score first, then the tie is over. Yeah. So if we can get into it 0-0 in 10, 15 minutes second half, then the nerves might set in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. And I think this PSG team at times hasn't been that great to control games completely and to just manage games. We saw that at Villa Park where they thought they'd game one and then they collapsed in that second half. So it's very possible. I mean, I'd said 51% PSG to win before the start of Tuesday night and 49 for Arsenal. That has changed maybe slightly because, yeah, you've got a goal advantage. So that's important. But you wouldn't go more than 60-40, really, because it's at the Parc des Princes and PSG have been very good in the Champions League since December, really, at home. But Arsenal are very much in it. If Martinelli and Trossard, again, we saw the Arteta clip, it's all about margins. If Martinelli or Trossard, one of them or both of them score, 2 massive chances, the game turns already on Tuesday night. So let's see. But there will be chances for Arsenal. But you're right, they will have to be better in their last third to deal with Dembele if he plays. But with Kvaratskhelia, I mean, it's the first time I've seen Timber really struggling against the winger this season. Vinicius was in his pocket. To be fair, even against Liverpool, he was so good. But last night, the first 15 minutes was one of the worst times I've seen Timber having since he joined the club, really, since he's back from injury. So that would be key. But with the ball, they will have chances.
Simon, we've been sort of catching up with some of the reaction to the game over the course of the day so far. Wayne Rooney was on punditry duty and he said that Arsenal are used to falling away at this stage in the season, or at least something to that effect. Felt like a really unfair comment.
It's not Man United's Wayne Rooney by any chance, is it?
Exactly.
Calm yourself down, Wayne.
Exactly. It felt like a bit of a disingenuous comment. What do you make of that kind of whole narrative around Arsenal?
Well, I think that is a narrative that will come, and it was actually interesting. We spoke to Mikel Moreno in the mix zone afterwards, and it was kind of said to him, if you lose this semi-final, people are going to point to 2 title races where you faded away. You've been in the semi-final where you've lost. You've had Carabao Cup semi-finals where you've not got over the line. And he made the point that, look, to be honest, the Arsenal players are their own harshest critic. You don't need to tell them what the outside noise is because they know more than anyone else what they want to achieve. So, I mean, comments like that from Rooney, I think it's a bit disingenuous when the semi-final's not even over yet. We don't know if they've fallen away or not. They've just gone behind at half-time, as Mikel Arteta would call it. But I think the most pressure will be coming internally from those players because they'll know that this is a great opportunity to make some history and get in a Champions League final.
Julian, Arsenal have been ahead on the scoreboard in the Champions League this season, going into yesterday's game, more than anybody else, 53% of their total match time. Do you think they struggled to cope with being behind in a game and that balance between going after it and chasing it, but also making sure they didn't give anything more away?
No, I'm not sure about that because the way they reacted after 25 minutes where they were underwater completely, I think they deserve credit for that. There's this famous huddle where we see Rice saying, we need the ball, otherwise we're dead. They're going to kill us more. And to be fair, after that, it was more of a double pivot with Merino and Rice, which I think is the tactical tweak that Arteta did. Luis Kelly came inside a little bit more in possession And that's how the Martinelli chance arrived. And I don't think they wanted Miles there too much at the start, because that obviously leaves open the left-hand side. And if you lose the ball against what is really, I think, PSG, the best pressing team in Europe and the best counter-pressing team in Europe, probably with Barcelona, it's risky. At the start, you can't really have Luis Kelly coming inside, because if he loses the ball or if somebody else loses the ball, then Desiree Doué or whoever is on that right, Hakimi, like, has literally the boulevard for himself. So, but that changed after the first half hour, and that was much better. And really, as we've been saying, the stats show it. It's completely level pretty much from 30th minute onwards for an hour. So yeah, I think the way they reacted, because we've seen teams that when the start of the game doesn't go their way and they go a goal behind, even at home, they don't come back. They struggle and they are frustrated. They lose their head a little bit. You start getting a yellow card. Real Madrid being very much like that this season. I thought Arsenal deserve a lot of credit for the way they bounced back after what was a really horrid first half an hour, really.
Perry, there was chat about that kind of tweet that Mikel Arteta made. He was asked about it in the press conference. People were trying desperately to get the answer out of him. What was it specifically that he changed? Do you think it was what Jules mentioned, the tweak in midfield and the fullback coming inside a bit more?
I think it was a bit of both, actually. I think it was having a little bit more structure in midfield, but there was 3 or 4 times after that first 20 minutes where Saliba followed Dembele all the way in, Kivior followed him all the way in, because that's what you need to do. You just need to be brave and go in, and then 2 fullbacks come in, and you have one, with your other centre half. So I'm surprised they didn't do it a little bit quicker. But I agree with Julian. I was watching it, and talk about the atmosphere in the game. When your team's getting schooled for 20 minutes, it's very difficult to be positive, and the fans, get raucous and whatever. And then as we gradually worked our way back into it, and if you see Martinelli has a massive chance, probably 2 minutes before half-time, where he opens his body up and he actually telegraphs. It's a good save from Donnarumma, but he actually telegraphs where he's going to put it. And then, again, about impetus, if the Mourinho goal is allowed, when he scored, the Emirates exploded. And then when it was like, we were all setting up and Donnarumma's got the ball, and you're thinking, and then the nerves set in, because I could feel it in the stadium, people going, this is going to be given offside, this is going to be given offside. So again, you're talking about fine margins. But I must admit, I'm a massive Arteta fan. I loved his body language in the press conference afterwards. I loved the message, obviously, the thought in his head, the message he's going to give across. He said straight away, didn't he? This is half-time. It's small margins. We was well in the game. And he'll be saying to his team, we can match PSG. We've shown at the Bernabeu, like Real Madrid, we can keep them quiet. We can quieten that crowd down. We can do exactly the same. And as I said, we've got Thomas Partey come back. Thomas Partey will make a massive difference. Not just the screening, but then Mourinho can go and play up front. Then you have a focal point. All I will say is, please, 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 in the first 20, 25 minutes, please, David Raya, don't try and play out from the back. Just go into Mourinho. I know it's basic, but go into, put Mourinho where the halfway line touches the touch line, and go into him for 22 minutes just to calm the crowd down. But I love his body language and his press conference afterwards. It was just like, we're in the Champions League semi-finals here. You're talking elite level. The other team are allowed to have, good parts of the game. I think it might be a chance missed, because they had 2 massive chances in the last 10 minutes, 1v1s. I think one was Ramos went through, didn't he, and Barcola went through. Yeah. I think they might be thinking, watched at Luis Enrique, and I could see him pulling his hair out and doing his somersaults, thinking, they might see that as a chance missed. So there's loads to be positive about.
Is that the feeling, Julian, in France, that there was, those opportunities late on for PSG? And although they'll be delighted with a really good away performance overall, is there that feeling of frustration that they didn't manage to extend that lead?
Yeah, a little bit, because the one for Barcola and Ramos might have just been onside on the 1-2. It was not really clear, and because the ball went wide, the linesman just gave goal kick and play continued. So had he scored, I think VAR would have looked at it, and I think Ramos might have just been offside maybe. And the Ramos one, I think he thought he was offside, kept playing, and I'm not sure about the toe poke at that time in the game and the position he was on. But yeah, there are 2 big chances. And there's also Dembele, who had to come off because he felt his hamstring a little bit. And this team with Dembele and without Dembele is not the same. It's not the same at all. I mean, he's been an incredible player since December. Really, I never thought the height that he would get like that. And if Dembele can't start the second leg because it's only in 7 days, and you don't want to risk losing him for the rest of the season, because if you qualify for the final or all that kind of thing, there's still a French Cup final to be played as well. So they might not take any risk. But it's a very different story if you don't have Dembele than if you have him. So Arsenal will have Partey back, as we just said. And then Arteta will have to decide if Merino plays as a 9, what you do with Odegaard. There's a few things that Arteta can do, really. And from a PSG point of view, if Dembele is not there, again, it's not the same, because Ramos is a very different type of 9, obviously. Would you play him? Would you play Doué as a false 9, like we saw when Dembele came off? Or Barcola there, or Kvaratskhelia, who've also played as false 9s before. So that would be interesting to see what Dembele can do or cannot do in the second leg.
Julian, a lot of Arsenal fans would have been surprised by how good PSG were, given that we played them earlier in the season and they weren't at that level, it's fair to say. Just very briefly, give us a kind of overview of what you think Luis Enrique's done to get them from that point they were at in October to where they are today.
Well, how long do we have? You said quickly? Okay, I'm going to try quickly, I promise. It's like everything. For any coach that has a very clear style of football and identity and what he wants the team to do, you move the pieces of the jigsaw in all the positions that you can until they all fit properly. And I think one of the big things was to move Dembele from the right wing position, where really he'd always played and he was very good with Hakimi there, but to move him into a central position, that has changed everything. The fact that midfield 3 finally found the right balance. For a long time, he played Lee, for example, Kangin Lee in that midfield 3, never really worked out. Ruiz was in and out of the team. We're still waiting for Vitinha to be the best in that holding midfield position. And then finally that clicked. Neves, Vitinha, Ruiz clicked. And then they just, if you look at it, they have everything. A bit of physicality, technical ability, football IQ is out of this world, the energy, the intensity, all of that. So that clicked. And then Hakimi and Nuno Mendes just took their game to another level. So if on top of that you add 70 million for Kvaratskhelia, so then you have a team that is just almost perfect for what Luis Enrique wants it to be.
I have to say, you've done a cracking job of summarising that in a very short period of time.
Also, as well, they work their socks off.
Yeah.
Even their gifted players in the wide areas, they double up. They get back and they protect their 2 fullbacks. They always engage Saka first or Martinelli first. So what he's done is, what Arteta's done, he's got rid of all the big stars and big-time Charlies who were lazy off the ball. Both teams have been very similar.
Julian, just very, very quickly before I let you go, how do you think it's going to go in the second leg?
Come on, Julian.
I know I'm going to be nervous, that's for sure, at the stadium. But I think PSG have an advantage. We said that it's a fact, obviously, that goal from last night. But Arsenal have if Perry is right, if they keep it tight and solid and compact to start with, then the game will open up naturally. But they just have to avoid not conceding first and not too early. And then I think it's possible. I really believe anything is possible. It's not me trying to sit on the fence, I promise you. And I said 60-40 still for PSG now. I think that's a fair reflection. 40% from an Arsenal point of view with the second leg away from home. I think you take that and you stay positive and you put a plan together that can work.
Julian Laurens, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Now, there's only 7 days to go until it's time to do it all again at the Parc des Princes. So it's time to fire up the build-up and look at the key talking points ahead of a potentially history-making 90 minutes in Paris. Simon, how are you feeling going into the second leg? You know, Julian gives us a sort of 40% chance. How important is it, on top of sort of how you're feeling, I want to gauge that as well, but how important is it that we stay positive and that we, really do believe? Because what Arsenal achieved over those 2 legs against Real Madrid was quite frankly incredible. They've got to channel that belief, haven't they?
Yeah, and I think the main thing is just there are ways where you can see you can fix problems. I know we've spoken a lot about Partey, but I think having Merino up top, I think will make a big difference. I think the attack has always looked better when it's had a focal point, when it's been Havertz, when it's been Merino, having someone there to play off. Particularly, I think that PSG press is so good at swarming you. If you've got someone you can go long to, you've got that out ball. You then bring your wingers into play. I think the space for Martinelli, and Saka and Trossard to a degree when he pulled wide was because those fullbacks push up. So I think the good positive for Arsenal is you can see where they can make the differences. And it is 1 goal. It is only 1 goal. I mean, you put it on the other foot from when PSG, when they played Liverpool and they lost 1-0 at home, they scored within 10 minutes at Anfield and it completely changed that game. And that is why, I agree so much with Perry. I think that first sort of 10, 20, 25 minutes is so crucial to the whole match and how it plays. Because you cannot go there and concede a goal and suddenly the tie changes. I think it's how you set up is so crucial for Arsenal. And I think for Arteta, when he talks about it being half-time, he needs to make the point that when you come out, you set your stall out and you make sure that the game doesn't suddenly go away from you in the first 10 minutes. And all that work you put in is done for nothing. Ideally,
you want to be in that position, right, Perry, where, you start the game really solid. But is it as easily sort of done as the chat, basically? Because, you look at the likes of Kvaratskhelia, who came up against Jurrien Timber last night, and we've seen Jurrien Timber, as was already mentioned, pocket some of the very best in the world, yet he struggled with him. How do you deal with individual brilliance?
I think with Jurrien Timber, he'll think it has a point to prove, which all the other Arsenal players will have a point to prove. It's about your belief. It's about having the structure and the right system, which I think that Arteta can implement. I'd give him a DVD of May 26, 1989, when we had to go to Anfield and beat Liverpool by 2 clear goals, which never ever happened. And our manager Graham said, or what I said there, get in at half-time 0-0. Because it's PSGs. I think Julian's probably been very kind to us. I know he said 60-40. If I'm a Gooner, I'm probably at like 65-35 or 70-30. Do you know what I mean? So, but we've seen that PSG can have wobbles in games. Even though as brilliant as they were in the first 20-25 minutes, they still had little periods in the game where you can get at them. And Donnarumma, who's been brilliant, obviously, against Aston Villa, he was like an octopus when he pulling saves off all over the place. And he pulled off 2 brilliant saves from Trossard and Martinelli. Trust me, he has got one in him. He's not brilliant with the ball at his feet. Yeah. We saw for the goal where Mourinho scores, where he's doing the should I stay or should I go? He doesn't know whether to come or stay. So there's weaknesses in this PSG side. I think you can get at their 2 fullbacks. One thing, they're brilliant going forward, but I still think, as Bukayo Saka proved when Mendes was under pressure facing his own touchline, and the assistant gives the foul, and then Saka's in on. There's little weaknesses that you can exploit. So this will be, I think, the Arsenal players will be hurting. I think they'll probably think that they didn't perform to the levels that they have been performing. So you mentioned about Real Madrid game, we was nowhere near that level. So we've got a level that we can go up to. And when we get that first 10, 15 minutes, we can do the same as what they did to us. We can just quell it and just quiet it down a little bit. And expectation, PSG have never won the Champions League, right? As I said to Julian, the French media will be basically, this is theirs to lose. And you can spin that round as a massive positive for us. So, I'll be having my number 5 shirt on my back, just challenging we'll go over a little Thomas party.
No, I agree with that. I said that in the lead up to the game. I felt like for PSG, a team that had been built to win this competition, a club that's had a lot of investment, not to win Ligue 1 every season. It's to do this. It's to achieve the Champions League. So it felt like we went into it with that excitement. For them, there was more pressure. But we've talked a lot about the importance of going there and keeping it tight maybe at the beginning. I don't know if you agree, Simon, but in the early stages, I felt like they were moving us around too much. We were trying to press, but we were finding that we couldn't make that work. They were managing to play through us. It was dragging us right and left. Our midfielders were going out into wide spaces. Our fullbacks were coming infield at times, following players. Do we almost need to go into sort of George Graham mode, if you like, and sit back and put ourselves in a low block whereby we're not going to get pulled too far left and too far right? Is that how you survive a game? Because I felt we looked tired as the game went on last night.
Yeah, I think the key is, as we sort of spoken about, is knowing when to go and when to jump, as they say, isn't it? And when to hold. I think with someone like Dembele, with the sort of disruption he can cause, I think you've got to go with him. One of you's got to go and do that, and then you've got to move and manage it. And I think when Arteta spoke in the press conference about what he spotted and they corrected, I do think it was around the press and the organisation, because if you look back if you watch the 90 minutes again, the huge gaps that appear are in that first 20 minutes when the press isn't right, and I think they kind of shored up the middle of the pitch. I think, as Jules mentioned, with Moreno coming in a bit deeper and next to Rice, just made that middle of the pitch much harder to break through. And I think that's the key for Arsenal, to try and make it much harder. It'll be easier when Partey's in there and Rice can sort of go up and down. So yeah, it is a key at having that structure. And Arsenal have normally been so good at that. And I think Timber was someone who maybe got sucked in a bit he wanted to make such an impact, didn't he? He wanted to get on Kvaratskhelia that sometimes you've got to just maybe, don't get right the win there. Perry will know better than any of us, but just get close.
Touch
but not,
tight.
Yeah, but
It's
not,
touch tight,
I think it was
exactly.
3 times in 20 minutes. Timber goes through the back of him, and the referee we know was happy to blow the whistle. So it's such a fine margin to get that balance right. But I think after the first 20 minutes, Arsenal did do it well. And it's a bit like, in a boxing match where you're going to have those moments where you go to the corner and they say, look, you're suffering, stay in the fight. And Arsenal have stayed in the fight, and now they've got a chance to go through still.
Do you know what? I think it was nerves. I think it was a bit of nerves as well, I've got to be honest. The players looked a little bit edgy, and it was like a half and half team. Didn't put the full court press on, but then didn't sit back and say, right, you can... Because in games as well, you've got to see out 15, 20 minutes, 10-minute periods. When you know the team you're playing at this level, the other team are allowed to be quite good, and they're allowed to have the ball. So you've got to be savvy enough to go, right, we'll just see this out, which we didn't do. We didn't say, right, we're just going to sit. And players have got to take responsibility. You mentioned Declan Rice, I thought he was really good, but he played like he played for West Ham, where he knew that he couldn't release himself. He couldn't go forward, so then he was a bit deeper. Then PSG know, well, he's not going to be making marauding runs, so they get a bit more confident. So it's all little tweaks that can be made. And you've got to not concede in that first 15, 20 minutes, but you've still got to be brave enough to put them under pressure when you're in possession, because you've got to put that doubt in their mind. Because if you go there and just sit, and then the atmosphere, it builds and builds and builds, in the end, with the players they got in the wide areas and with Dembele, they're going to create something out of nothing. Do you know what I mean? So you still got to be brave enough to go, right, when we're in possession, we've got to commit people forward.
Mikel sort of alluded to the fact that he made that tweet, right? We talked about it over and over again. I think that was the big talking point coming away from his press conference. And you mentioned, Perry, that you felt that Declan Rice was playing like the West Ham Declan Rice at points. I know it was adjusted, but I refuse to believe that Mikel Arteta didn't say from the beginning, listen, as the 6, you're the lighthouse, you're the reference point for everyone. You can't go roaming in the same way that you do when you're an 8. So does Declan Rice have to take a bit of responsibility? I'm not seeking to have a go at him. He's a fantastic player. He's done amazing things for us. But did he maybe get caught up in the occasion a little bit? And did that contribute to him going roaming?
Yeah, but we don't know whether it's Saliba and Kivior who were instructed to follow Dembele in because they knew that he was going to go in base into the centre circle. Because Julian said they scored against Liverpool exactly the same. So we don't know whether because when Dembele was going deep, as a centre half, you feel a bit uneasy because you think, actually, we've got no one to mark here. Do you know what I mean? So it's probably all little bits of tweaks, because we looked like we wanted to put them under pressure at home, but then we didn't commit to it. So I think there's that with Rice, and I think it's the same thing with the 2 centre halves, because after 15, 20 minutes, they did start to go in with Dembele, and then he started to go a little bit wider. But will it in the pipe runs, we'll have a little period of time where you've got to see that difficult time out, and you've just got to ease through it. So there's a lot of stuff. And I say Donnarumma pulled off 2 world-class saves. So it wasn't if we didn't create chances.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We had the chances, didn't we? But Simon, they were unbelievable saves from Donnarumma. I remember watching the incidents live and thinking, come on, you've got to stick that in the corner. And you watch the replays back, and they've telegraphed where they're putting it, but they're not bad efforts. That he just gets down so quickly.
Yeah, and he seems to be this keeper who just has a knack of turning up in the big moments. I mean, everyone will remember, obviously, Euro 2022, sorry. And then also, of course, in the Villa game, when they were Villa were on the ropes, pushing forward, PSG, he finds a way to keep them in games. And I think that's what they've got there, is a proper world-class goalkeeper who in the big moments delivers. And I think the one area where you can get him is set pieces. I think for that goal where Marino scores, he gets very close to Donnarumma there, and he doesn't show any sort of intent to want to come and get that. And I think that is one area where he's vulnerable. But as you say, those saves, particularly the Trossard one. I thought Trossard had missed it. That's how good a save it was, because I was like, how's he put that wide? But then you see he just gets that little fingertip on it, and yeah, absolutely massive performance.
The Trossard one is a world-class save. The Martinelli one is a very good save, but when Martinelli's run through, because he's got the ball and he opens his body out, he lets Donnarumma know where he's going to put it. Because normally, like a natural finisher, then opens, give yourself another half a yard, and then you can whip it into the near post. So, they were like top saves. But as I said before, I think he's got one in him.
You mentioned big.
By the way, how old is he?
Very young.
He's got to be like 52, and was he in AC Milan's first team when he was about 12?
About 16.
I think he's 20. He's only 25, isn't he?
He broke through incredibly young.
That's a big paper round.
Around there. Yeah, for sure. But you guys mentioned it. Big game player. He is a big game player. He produces in the big game moments. Do you think, Perry, that that's something that maybe this Arsenal team is missing at the moment? Because Rice has done it against Real Madrid. You'd argue that Saka did it as well. But outside of those two, with some of the absences we've got, with some of the injuries, it doesn't feel like we've got enough of those really top-tier superstars.
I don't think it's that, to be fair. I think these players have played at the top level. Again, this group of players, it's only second season in the Champions League. Do you know what I mean? So they're learning on the job, basically. But you've got Saliba, you'd say was one of the best free centre-halves in the world. Martin Odegaard, when he's on form, you would say that he'll be in the top 10 midfield players in the world. You mentioned Bukayo Saka, obviously Declan Rice. But any team's going to miss Gabriel, like, you know, that partnership at the back. And Kivior's done really well, to be fair. Like, he hasn't made, I'm not going to tempt fate, but he hasn't made, like, any ricks. It's Saliba who's actually made the two mistakes. So I don't think it's that we haven't got the big players. I think it's just learning how to manage different parts of the game. And this is, if you're a player, trust me, this is where you want to be. You want to be in the Champions League semi-finals. You want to go and test yourself away from home like we did against Real Madrid. So there will be a lot of these players. I think we've got leaders there. This is where it needs to be shown, obviously, next Wednesday.
Yeah, for sure. There's lots of work still to be done for the Gunners, of course. Look, based on that conversation, I think we all agree that we need to turn the game quite ugly, at least at the start. How do we go about doing that, apart from the basics of, you know, maybe dropping that a little bit deeper, taking less risks? Is it about winning free kicks? Is it about making it stop-start? Because it feels like PSG, for quite a young team, and they are a young team when you look at their ages on paper, they seemed very well versed in that. So maybe does it come from the manager? Yeah,
I think, I mean, it's funny because if you remember when Arsenal won the Champions League in that first season last year, and they were playing against Porto in that first leg, and they kind of got schooled a bit by Conceição and that team, who were very good at dark arts. I remember the whole narrative then was, you know, Arsenal need to be more streetwise. And then this season, some of the criticism has been, well, they're too streetwise. But I actually think the balance is key for this away game, to try and just be a little cute at times, try and get the momentum out of the fans. You know, if the game stop-start, try and get those set pieces. If you're in the PSG half and you get one, you know, a great opportunity to put the ball in the box. So it's being a bit more cuter, which I actually think, in fairness to the team, they have become a lot better at. But PSG, what we saw from them, I mean, Kvaratskhelia, I think with Timber, he kind of knew that he's just trying to come through the back of me. So if I just wait here, I'm just going to win a free kick, and the frustration builds. So yeah, it's about having that cuteness, and I think Arsenal have developed that. I think when they first played in the Champions League on Artetas, they were a bit naive, but I think they are more streetwise now. And in a game like this, in an atmosphere like this, I think just being able to be a bit cute and slow the game down and, you know, calm it, I think will be valuable. Also, what you do is not give away cheap free kicks in that first 15, 20 minutes in the wide areas. Do you know what I mean? Because Kvaratskhelia, when he was on the ball, there was an instance in the first half where we trebled up on him and he should have had a penalty, because when he goes past Timber put his arms across him. So you've just got to be very clever in the way that you try and combat them in the wide areas. With a bit of luck, Dembele will be injured, because he will be a massive... What's he got, 33 goals this season, I think?
He's had an incredible campaign.
He will be like a massive miss for him. And it's just then being brave enough when you're in the wide areas. Hopefully, because Saka, you know, will another game under his belt, because I think he's played on adrenaline. I can't believe the level that he's come back at, considering he was out for like 3 months, obviously having his hamstring injury. I think last night we saw him just drop a bit with that adrenaline, which is understandable, because you've got to get those like games in your legs. So I'm hoping that he's going to be a bit sharper in that.
It was the set pieces where I think actually, as the game wore on, PSG got a bit more cuter. Like right at the end, they kind of realised, hang on, if we can... Donnarumma's thinking, if I go down here, this ref's going to give me a free kick. Now, that sort of thing where they kind of worked out with set pieces that Arsenal are so strong that they kind of just back into a play and win a foul. It's those sort of moments that you've got to be aware of, I think, particularly when it's so tight in these margins.
And it is about making tweaks with the personnel that we have, right? There was only 13 players involved in the game last night, just 2 subs. And I don't believe that's because Mikel Arteta didn't feel that we needed those fresh legs, Perry. I think it was more so a case of, I'm looking at my bench and I don't really see any options that will change the game for me, that could help me.
Well, I think Wanyeri should have come on earlier. I said before, I think that he's proved that, you know, he feels comfortable in that arena. And I think because maybe he was looking at Odegaard thinking, I know that you can produce something out of nothing. I know that you can find the pass. You know what I mean? And he's trusted him and he's his captain. And he said there's not a lot of options on the bench, but obviously with Partey coming back in, that gives you another option on the bench, because it'd probably be Trossard who leaves out. So then that makes your bench that little bit stronger. Yeah, so maybe I'm, just trying to. My glass is always half full. Do you know what I mean? So
as it should be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's any team's going to miss those injuries, and people, the outside noise is, you keep making shit about injuries, but there's been a period of time where we had our 3 first choice forwards weren't playing. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's circle the wagons time, because that's what I would be doing if I was Arteta. Because we said about Wayne Rooney's comments about the atmosphere, and anyone who knows football, so he's got his Man United hat on. Anybody who knows football knows the way that the crowd's going to be when you see those moments happening before your very eyes. So I'd be, putting up little clips and people being critical, because I think you can feed the negativity. I think you can get positives out of it, where you feed off it and you go, right, we've got something to prove here, and we're going to show everybody that we can produce in the big moments.
Right, should we get some predictions then? The Arsenal women have overturned a deficit against the French team to face Barcelona in the final of the Women's Champions League.
Loving your work, H. Loving your work.
There you go.
But to be fair, though, no one saw that coming either.
No, exactly.
Because Lyon were that good.
Exactly. So how do we think this is going to go then? And I'm going to try and do a prediction with my head rather than my heart. I'll start with you, Simon. How do you see it going?
I've got a feeling that it is going to be a bit of a mad game, I think, in the end. I think it's going to be quite sort of low and just go a bit crazy, and I'm going to go for 2-2 is my prediction.
That means
2-2 on the night or 2-2 on aggregate?
2-2 on the night. Heartbreak for us.
Desmond, right, okay.
How about you, Perry?
I'm going to be a bit more positive. I think that out of all the teams in the competition, us and Inter Milan are probably the best structured defensively when we're at full strength. I think there's every chance that we could nick a 1-0 or 2-1 and go extra time and penalties. And then it's Donnarumma against David Raya.
And the thing with Donnarumma, you just know if he has to deal with a penalty from Bukayo Saka, there's a bit of history there. That worries me.
He will love the penalty shootout, Donnarumma, as well. He is someone who will relish that.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, look, I know that it's going to be stressful, whatever happens, right? I think the first 45 minutes at the Bernabeu was probably the most stressed I've ever been in my life. I was intimidated by the surroundings where we were. We miss a penalty. They then get awarded one. Of course, it was eventually overturned, but that was a really stressful process. And I remember coming out of there exhausted, but delighted at the same time. I expect more of the same in terms of the emotional roller coaster. I think we might just fall short. I think PSG...
Hey, do you realise what channel we're on here? I miss it away on PSG.
But I don't want to be clipped up and put all over social media. People saying, look, he said they were going to go through. No, look, I'm going with my head rather than my heart. I think it'll be a 1-1 draw on the night, and I think we'll just about miss out, unfortunately.
This is just feeding the machine for the players.
There you go, see? There we go. No,
I know what I'm doing.
YouTube channel.
Arteta's clipping this up.
There's a naysayer and a doubter. You know what I mean? We've got to get that positivity.
Play it in the dressing room. Brilliant stuff, guys. Thank you so much. That's all we've got time for on today's Inside Gooners. An anxious wait lies ahead for that all-important second leg in Paris. A massive thank you to Perry Groves and Simon Collings, and we'll see you all next time.